What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Best Granic, the podcast where we get to get a deeper look into uh, American perspectives and mentality in the sports world. Uh, this is Marston speaking with you guys, and today I have the pleasure of hosting my former teammate, Nosa. I don't want to chop up your last name, so you're going to be able to say that in a sec. But long story short, we played together throughout college. This is a great individual, extremely smart, uh, has an engineering background right now, played volleyball for majority of his, you could say, career, and recently transitioned into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's going to be a topic that we focus around today. But before we do, Nosa, do you have anything you want to say? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can give a second to introduce myself. Hey everyone, I'm Nosa Aguibar, and currently I consider myself a hobbyist. There's a lot of things that really draw my interest, and I just wanted to pursue, just because I do believe the fact that the practice makes perfect, and you should pursue what you want, and getting better really takes time and intentional practice. So right now, I still play volleyball from time to time, but my main focuses have been Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, getting better at salsa dancing, as well as public speaking, and just figuring out what other hobbies really fit my interests. I come from a background with Nigerian parents, so I was raised by two immigrants growing up. I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with Martin, studied electrical engineering there, and I played club volleyball with him as well there too. Currently, I'm a product marketing manager for Texas Instruments for their semiconductor business, and I've been liking that a lot considering I get to balance business with technology. So that's a little bit about myself.
That was a beautiful intro. No, so first off, I totally forgot about the salsa dancing. That is also
Yeah.
a very interesting route that you took, and I'm thinking about taking it up myself. I just don't know if I need to find a partner or not. No, so what's the reason? Because again, throughout college, your only sport was volleyball, correct?
Mhm.
How did you decide BJJ was your next sport? What made you go that route? Because when you think of volleyball and jiu-jitsu, I mean, from my perspective, they're two totally different worlds.
Yeah, they are completely different and they don't really translate over one from another. Besides the fact that I got a lot of athleticism from playing volleyball for so long, that translated well to jujitsu. But when it comes to actual skill sets, they don't really translate at all. The reason I initially got interested in Brazilian jiu-jitsu was because one of my roommates in college actually started doing it, and I was very interested in trying it as well. Just because when I was growing up, I the only martial art that I ever even tried was karate, and that's not really something my parents really pushed me to get better at all. They cared mainly about education and career success. So when I was really young, I think I only did it for probably a couple weeks, and once I showed a little bit of boredom, my mom never really pushed me to continue doing it. So looking back, I wish I spent a lot more time doing martial arts and just understanding those disciplines as well as learning how to fight because that definitely gives you a lot of confidence as well as it's is a good skill to know in case things go bad. Well, when it came to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the way my friend pitched it to me was pretty interesting. He basically told me how much it's benefited his life, how it's a good workout for him as well, and how you're basically able to take control of the situation without really having to inflict a ton of damage onto a person. How you can definitely keep them under your control with learning the different grappling arts or different grappling strategies within jiu-jitsu. And then I did a lot more research on it as well. Like I did stereotypical podcast research that people do with martial arts, learned a lot of ways it could benefit my life as well. So that's what really got me gravitated to it. So once the summer hit for that next semester, I used the money I was getting from my internship actually to pay for jujitsu lessons and a jujitsu class, and I fell in love with it the first day I started doing it. Which, if you heard my experience on my first day, you may have been confused why I still kept doing it today. The first day I tried doing jujitsu, I went to a nogi class. So there's two different kinds of jujitsu. There's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the gi on, so the big robe you see people wearing. But there's also a version without the robe, which is called no gi, which basically you have different like dry fit clothing or different rash guards that you roll with. And I tried Nogi just because I didn't want to invest money into buying a gi, just being the cheap college kid I was. So I tried that, and I went against this white belt to first start sparring, and apparently I did okay. There were some natural reactions I had that the professor was impressed at the time, but then he had a purple belt roll against me. So in case y'all don't know, the progression for belts in jiu-jitsu is white, blue, purple, and then brown, and then top is black. So the purple belt was probably doing it for a good at least 3 to 5 years. And the professor told him, hey, put this guy in every choke imaginable. It goes without saying that I could not move my neck for the next week or so. A lot of people would have quit by then, but me being stubborn and me really wanting to learn how to do that to other people, I fell in love with the sport and I continue to do it to this day.
Do you think any of that relentlessness transition from volleyball, or do you think that's more over your personality of always trying to get better?
A little bit of both. Like volleyball definitely helped change my mentality of how to get good at things. When I was growing up, I had a pretty bad mentality when it came to like talent or just skill. Just because a lot of the people that I spent time with growing up as a kid were just naturally gifted at school. They didn't have to study as hard. And for a lot of things or subjects in school pertaining to math and science, I did not need to study that hard in high school either or in middle school. I just kind of got things. So and if there are things that I didn't get immediately or gravitate to immediately, I thought it wasn't a good use of my time to try to get better at that. That was until I started playing volleyball. And volleyball taught me that I can definitely get better if I put time and effort into intentionally practicing things. Like even in middle school, I got cut from the team my eighth grade year, the first time I tried out, and I thought volleyball just wasn't for me. But I watched the Olympics that year as well, and I was just really fascinated about guys volleyball and how it wasn't really taught the proper way in gym volleyball, as you know, Marcin. Like gym volleyball and actual volleyball are completely different sports. Like you can barely even call a gym volleyball an actual sport. So once I got a new interest in volleyball and once I started practicing more, once I started really pay attention to how it's actually played a game, I got a lot better. And then by the time my senior year of high school rolled out, I got all conference and all county honors just because all the work I put into getting better. So that really taught me that if I just put my mind to something, I can get better at it. Same thing with studying in college. I needed to change our study habits in college because University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Engineering is one of the top programs in the country, and you have to really learn to study. You can't just go off of just your pure intellect, or you're not going to get past even freshman year. So just having those habits of realizing I need to spend time to actually get good at something is why I also had the passion and had the wherewithal to keep practicing jujitsu, even though I was terrible at it when I first started it.
And my hat's off to you because the engineering program, mind you, my senior year, I lived with 3 engineers, and then I had a ton of them going in and out of my house. I saw their study habits, and I know, how their social life looked, and then I also know how your social life looked, and
Mhm.
I've always been jealous of the fact that you're able to tackle volleyball, school like you do, and you're able to like speak with everybody. Because right now, I mean, we haven't spoken in a couple months, but I'm
Mhm.
currently at SGH, which is the Warsaw School of Economics, and I'm studying business analytics. And I sometimes feel like I'm just in over my head and I gotta study a ton. So kudos.
Yeah.
Outside that subject, also straying away from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the moment, I wanted to understand how you got into volleyball because, for example, in Poland, volleyball right now is I mean, in my opinion, the national sport because we suck at soccer and we've sucked at soccer for multiple years versus volleyball has been prime just like it has been in the US for well over a decade. But when studying out volleyball in America, obviously we have a lot of other sports that are available to us that have more of an emphasis put on them that have that glit and glamour of an actual sport like basketball, football, or baseball. What made you choose volleyball?
Sure thing. Well, first, props to you for going back to school and studying, especially a few years after you graduated, because I know after you graduate, you kind of get out of the habit of trying to learn more things in a formal way. So props to you for at least getting back into school to improve yourself. So really good props to you. In
Appreciate that.
terms of, thank you, sure thing. In terms of why I chose volleyball, it was pretty interesting. Like for one, I actually didn't know that volleyball was a huge sport in Poland. I mean, it makes sense because you guys usually have really good national teams. So I should have probably connected those two together. But as you know, or as you said in America, there's a ton of sports you can choose. And guys volleyball isn't usually the most popular sport amongst the country. There's only a few areas in the country that really have a good like guys volleyball, like middle school and high school pipeline. That being Chicagoland area where you and I are from, or like California, but those are two really big hubs. The reason why I chose volleyball is because I tried doing basketball at first and I was just god awful at it. I was not good at it. I only made the team like my eighth grade year, and even then I didn't play much because I wasn't great at it. But I wanted
What,
to
pos-
find something. What was that?
what position were you?
I was a center or forward just because I
Yeah.
was relatively taller for
I
my
was
age at least.
I was in
Mhm.
I was in the same situation. I was a center throughout grade school and then high school.
Yeah.
I stopped my freshman year because I mean I'm 6'2" for reference for Polish people. That's 188 centimeters. I was this tall as a 14-year-old, and I got
Oh.
in high school and they were like, he's gonna grow to be 6'6", like over
Mm.
meters, and I never grew. So I was a little SOL when it came to basketball. I didn't have the guard skills, and
Mhm.
I just knew that I'd be better in volleyball.
Yeah.
Interrupt. My
Uh,
bad.
No, all good, all good. Yeah, I actually did not know that. I didn't know you stopped growing in the freshman year. It happened to quite a few people I knew, like people who were like 5'10" or like 5'8" even in like fifth grade and thought they were going to be giants and they just stayed at rate for the rest of their life. So I didn't know that. But yeah. So I was not good at basketball either. So I wanted to find something that I would gravitate to. And even though I wasn't good at basketball skill wise, I still had athleticism and a vertical leap that had definitely helped me with volleyball. So after I made the team my freshman year in high school, I just never looked back and I just kept on getting better and better. But that's why I started playing volleyball. That and actually, the reason I even thought about doing volleyball again was because I watched the Olympics and watched how the men played, and I thought it was a really entertaining sport. So that's what really got me started to play volleyball again.
I agree with you. I definitely think that first off, I'm happy that I'm 6'2" and I didn't stop growing at 5'8" because that would be slightly a
Yeah.
tragedy. I transition to libero, which honestly I don't mind. I've been thinking about doing it recently. Like you didn't see a lot of my passing game back in America, but I mess around here and there in an open gym, man, and
Mhm.
we'll see. But back to jujitsu, which is going to be the foundation of our conversation. How did your transition look in the initial phase? Was there a big learning curve for specific aspect to jujitsu? Um, yeah,
Yeah, it was definitely a big learning curve. It's a big learning curve for anyone who's never done any grappling before. The people who tend to gravitate to jiu-jitsu the most and have the best success earlier on are people who have done like wrestling or judo before, just because they're familiar with some more movements and just more comfortable with grappling and wrestling. But for me, it was a pretty steep learning curve because, like I said, nothing from volleyball outside of my pure athleticism really transferred over to jiu-jitsu. So when I first started, like everyone was tapping me out, like kids, old ladies, like everyone was giving me the business, man. But after a while, I started trying to be at least more intentional and training more because I had only at that time trained over that's the summer in the Chicago suburbs, and I was always going like 2 or 3 times a week. Then I started doing the club at Illinois, University of Illinois, but I only did that for a couple weeks because COVID happened in the middle of that. So I was only able to train at Illinois for a couple weeks. But then when I moved to Dallas, I started training a lot more because at that point in time I had graduated and had a lot more free time after work to train. And doing that or moving to that new gym really helped me a lot. One of the biggest things that'll help you progress more in jujitsu or just in life in general is having people who have been in your shoes before and have proved upon that helping you learn along the way. The one of the things that could have helped me a lot more in my older gyms was if there were more upper belts. So that being like the blue or the more advanced belts like purple, brown, and black teaching you. Because when you have a specific professor or one professor, they can only do so much and they can only really give general advice to a whole class versus if you do a private lesson with them or if you get help from the purple belts or above, they can really help you tailor your game and figure out specific issues you're dealing with or give you different more detailed advice on your technique and how to deal with certain situations. So that's a rule for jiu-jitsu but also for life. You definitely need mentorship and guidance for more experienced people in order to help you progress. So that's basically how I've gotten from the crappy white belt you probably saw like in 2019 of me to now blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Look at you. Congrats on the blue belt. And then I definitely agree with you. Diving into the deep end in most cases is extremely beneficial because, even though you might fail or lose or whatever it may be, the learning experiences you gain from putting yourself in that scenario are extremely beneficial. As long as
Mhm.
you kind of are consistent and keep trying to progress in whatever art that may be.
Definitely.
Um, but also, you mentioned, it's a rather large transition going from volleyball to jujitsu, considering all is exclusively a team sport where it's we, not me, and then jujitsu is completely about yourself. You gotta focus in, you gotta hone your art, you gotta be
Mhm.
accountable, and you also have to get yourself out of tough situations. You don't have teammates around you that can necessarily, you know, take somebody's hand off your neck.
Mhm.
Could you talk about that transition a little bit, how it went from going to a team-based mentality to an individual mentality
Yeah.
focused?
Yeah, definitely. Because before that, I only really played team sports, those being basketball and volleyball, and a little bit of soccer when I was a little kid. So having the onus be completely on yourself was definitely changing mentality. You couldn't rely on other people to do their job. The only thing you can do is rely on yourself, and that's definitely a mentality shift. But also, it gives you a little bit more freedom and responsibility too, just to understand that everything is on you by the end of the day. It's you can't even control how the other person you're fighting reacts or does things or their skill set. You can only control yourself. So that's why it's really important to train as much as you can on your own game and try to hone your own skills. But yeah, it definitely was a difficult transition just because, like you're saying, I couldn't rely on other teammates. I have to only rely on myself for being responsible for training as well as how I react to certain things. And I definitely got a lot of nerves when I would compete because of that. Not just because I'm also fighting someone and it's just violence, but also because it's on solely on me. So the first few times I ever competed definitely got the jitters because it was all on one person.
What about now, though? So you mentioned you started BJJ back in 2019 during your internship, and obviously progressing to a blue belt means that you've been in a lot of scenarios. How
Mhm.
did, and you also mentioned that you do still play volleyball. How did it feel stepping out on a court versus stepping out on a mat? Is there a difference between how you lock in to compete?
Yeah, there definitely is. Like, there are a few things I could probably think of. For one, when I'm trying to lock in to compete or even just have a hard role in jujitsu, I actually want to calm myself down more because I'm more prone to doing stupid mistakes when I'm really psyched up. Like you'll probably see in some cases, like some people are like MMA fighters, and then they'll have fans saying that they need to get angry, or the corner sometimes will say they need to get angry or psyched up. That's not usually great advice, at least that I don't think it is, because you want to be more locked in to make sure you're doing technique properly. Because at the end of the day, it's your technique that you should be relying on. If you get too psyched up, or if I get too amped up on something, then I start thinking erratically, stop being cognizant of what the other person's doing, maybe rush my routines or rush different techniques. Like maybe I don't get the right grip and I just go for the sweep right away or things like that. Versus volleyball, I usually am pretty good at toning everything out on a court for the most part. Like I know people usually can get stage fright or people can be scared of playing in big crowds, but in volleyball, I don't know why. I just been really comfortable playing in front of a lot of people or in front of no one, and it doesn't make any difference to me either way. So I definitely have to work on calming myself down a lot more when it comes to competing in jujitsu versus volleyball. It just kind of comes naturally to me to just focus on my job. Maybe that's just because I have less things to focus on for the end result when playing volleyball, considering I have other teammates to rely on me or I can rely on. Well, like for example, the middle coming to close the block with me, or the outside putting a ball away, or the other our team server seating. So I can solely focus on my job. While in jujitsu, I have to calm myself down because everything relies on me at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And then I don't know about you, but I have a similar situation in terms of volleyball where I love the fact that I'm able to tune everything out and just focus on reacting to where the ball is, reacting to the movements of the other players on the other side of the court, and
Mhm.
also have the accountability of the whole team on me. My thing is, as a volleyball player, though, I would get myself a little hyped up where I try to stay calm in a lot of situations, but also like if I got housed, let's say, like on a block, whatever it may be, I would look at that situation and try to come in a little bit hotter as an athlete for another couple of points. You know what I mean? Try to
Mhm.
swing a bit harder. Try to get my vertical up to at least something that's considerable to yours. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because to those that haven't, I mean, that to everybody that's listening to this, Nos has got a very very beautiful vertical that
Thank you.
I'm jealous of to this day. I got those. I just got the old man moves. I got the beach moves.
Yeah,
Why
but I'm
not?
really jealous of your heavy arm swing, dude. Like Marston has a hammer, dude. Like Marston has a hammer of an arm swing, so I'm jealous of that.
All love here. All love here between two right sides from back in the day. Um,
Yes, sir.
Also, you mentioned your routine in jujitsu. Could you kind of elaborate on that? What do you mean routine? Because when I think of routine, I'm thinking some kind of dance, some kind of way to set up a move. I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, when I say routine, I mean the set of moves I want to do or the game plan I want to have. For y'all who know jujitsu, I try to play a lot of either deep half guard or de la hiva, just because I'm athletic, so I can get away with a lot in deep half guard and I can make different transitions. But for de la hiva, I have pretty long legs, so I try to use them as much as possible. Or I'll try to go into like spider guard to try to get people off balance as well. So there's different routines and different things I want to set up when I get into those guards. So
So
for people who don't, sorry, go ahead.
keep going. I didn't realize you're
Yeah,
going to speak to the individuals that aren't as fluent in BJJ.
yeah. And for people who aren't as fluent, then I'd say I try to use different moves that tailor to either my athletic abilities or to my natural abilities of just having long legs and long arms as much as possible, and then try to set up moves that'll help me or easier to do because of those attributes.
Appreciate that breakdown for the people that aren't as fluent. Um,
Mhm.
with those techniques, if you want to elaborate more into the individuals that have a BJJ background, did you find any techniques or aspects of jujitsu challenging and ultimately extremely rewarding to master?
Yeah, definitely. My weakest point is probably being in someone else's side control, which means that how do I explain this or visually? I'm basically on bottom and someone is controlling my chest while the rest of their body's on the side of me. So just trying to regard or trying to redefend that is hard because I have long legs, so I can't get like under or back to regard. So that's usually the most difficult part of my game, and that's more of a physical attribute and not being able to make enough space to try to regard versus technique. I mean, sure, at the end of the day, everything is about technique, but that's usually my hardest position. But it's probably one of the most important positions to get out of because if you're passing, one of your main objectives, if not to immediately get into mount, is definitely to get inside control to really dominate and stabilize your opponent. So it's probably one of the more useful things to learn is to get out from under, but also the hardest for me is because I have long legs and it's hard for me to try to regard that. And plus, I'm not all that flexible, and it could definitely be easier if I was to regard. So that's another challenge for me. So the hardest part of my game probably is bottom side control. But it's also funny because the best part of my game is top side control because I'm really good at putting pressure or working on putting pressure, stabilizing, as well as trying to hunt for submissions there. A lot of my game in terms of submissions is geared around side control if I can get to that position.
That's interesting. I mean, I didn't realize how dangerous side control may be. I know that when you're fully on some, if you, it's mounted,
Yeah.
right? When you're mounted,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
now, yeah.
might be game over, especially due to the fact that I've watched a little bit of UFC.
Hmm.
So again, I understand the topics broadly, but I feel like I'm gonna have to get on the mat with you one day and just I'm gonna have to go through
Yeah.
your day one experience, and
Yeah.
hopefully I get
Yeah,
um
definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend it.
well, one thing that you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, you said that you were looking for, ways to defend yourself, where jujitsu gives you confidence when it comes to potential altercations you might see out in the real world. My question to you is, typically, at least from what I've seen out in the real world, it starts from a stand-up game.
Hmm.
How did how did you decide that BJJ was going to be your art form compared to Muay Thai, which I practiced a little bit, or Krav Maga, which I kind of like looked at, or anything else?
Yeah.
Because I mean, typically you don't start down on the ground.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, I'm glad you got into Muay Thai a little bit. I think I want to say our senior year you were thinking about it, so I'm glad you actually went ahead and started doing it. It's definitely a good workout, really fun. It's really practical too in terms of standing up and striking. The reason why I trained BJJ more, just because I I definitely want to end the fight, and I don't want to inflict as much or a ton of damage to the opponent, as well as help me understand grappling. So that's the main reason why I picked it. But that's not the only martial art I ended up doing. I did a bit of Muay Thai and a bit of boxing too, just so I can at least have some semblance of striking. But the main reason why I wanted to focus on Jiu-Jitsu, even though it brings you to the ground, that doesn't mean you always have to go to the ground. I learned a lot of stuff around jujitsu that would help me in a potential fight. Just understand how to maintain distance, how to grapple while standing up too.
Oh,
Because the way jujitsu is evolving is that they're putting a lot of different things into the sport as well, just so it's more well-rounded, especially for competition. And that's something I'm glad different professors realize, because pure jujitsu is just going to the ground, or is a lot of it's going to the ground immediately and pulling guard. But if you're in a fight like that's not on the mats, I don't think you want to pull guard. That's not something I would do. But naturally, fights do go to the ground at some point in time. They usually go to the ground some point in time. So if they actually do, then that's when you can take control of the situation and dominate there. If the other person doesn't even know any martial arts, or even if they know some, if you train more and they take it to the ground for you, then you should have control of that fight between you and them.
gotcha. And then for me, for example, I did a class at BJJ. I got
Mhm.
a ton of floor burns, long story short, more than I've
Yeah.
ever gotten in volleyball. And I got a
I
couple
bet.
blisters to, hold as trophies for the time being. Um, but I was not discouraged, but I realized that I don't have the time commitment to BJJ, or at least I didn't think I did. For those individuals that are thinking about potentially looking into BJJ or have tried and, had my situation where they didn't pursue it, um, how long would you take the learning curve takes where you kind of get hooked, where you're understanding what's going on in the gym, where you're confident?
That's a great question. It definitely depends and changes from person to person, as well as how much you train overall. Like theoretically speaking, someone who's trained for like 4 months, but they do it 5 times a day, 5 times a week, will get better than someone who has done it for a year but only does it 2 times a week. So it really depends on how often you train. But generally speaking, the average person is drowning and trying to just to survive for the first 3 to 4 months. But after that, you start picking stuff and putting things together, and you can at least have a more respectable role of people who have slightly more experience than you. And you don't even realize how good you become until you start rolling and sparring with the people who just started. And once you start hitting arm bars with them, triangles on them after 4 months, you realize how far you've come. So I'd say you really start piecing things together about 4 months into consistent training. And then how fast you progress is really dependent on how often you train and how intentionally you train too. One of the things that really hindered my training was that I wasn't being intentional with it. I was just trying to get in as many sparring or rolls as possible, not really thinking of new techniques to add or what techniques I'm doing wrong, just trying to use too much strength and not enough technique to compensate. So I definitely could have improved a lot better a lot sooner in my jiu-jitsu career if I was more intentional and not trying to just win the match. At the end of the day, winning is not what makes you better. Understanding where you went wrong and trying to improve that is what gets you better.
That's definitely a beautiful piece of advice. Also, kind of thinking about the culture within jiu-jitsu, something that makes you stay. Um, how would you compare the jiu-jitsu community compared to volleyball? Because, when I think of volleyball, I think of a very inclusive environment where you have a ton of people rooting for each other. I mean, I think there's more sportsmanship than I've seen in basketball within volleyball. And the beauty of the game is that you can play on grass, court, sand, concrete if you want. You could play in pairs. You could play one-on-one if you want. There's so many iterations of the game where I feel like volleyball is truly limitless, and the community is just fun because you could, play socially, you could play with a couple of drinks, you could play competitively. There's, again, limitless options. So I'm curious how you perceive BJJ and compare it to the volleyball community, which you were very much a part of, or still
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely do see a lot of similarities between the jiu-jitsu and the guys volleyball community and how supportive they are. Like every culture at every gym changes from gym to gym, but generally speaking, once you meet someone who does jiu-jitsu, it becomes a immediate bond where you can just talk about like anything jiu-jitsu wise. It's really cool to see. And your gym is usually very supportive of you when it comes to just training, giving you advice to get better, as well as cheering you on when you're competing, especially my gym. And that's the reason why I've stayed at my gym for as long as I have, even though I've moved a little bit farther away from it, just because I really like the culture and I really like the people who go there as well. So there definitely are a lot of similarities in how supportive that environment is versus the volleyball environment that I grew up in.
Gotcha. Um, with volleyball, you, I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been able to take lessons out of it and translate them into my real life. For example, um, volleyball is a game they're obviously going to be made. It's about how you come back from those mistakes, and it's about, trying to have more success than failures, long story short, where you're kind of riding a wave and you want to make sure you're going up more than down, right?
Mhm.
Have you incurred lessons like that from BJJ?
Yeah, most definitely. I think I've gotten a lot mentally tougher to handle just regular stresses of life by doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu because it's meant to put you in the most uncomfortable situations and see how you react to that and get out of that, as well as problem solve too. I'll oftentimes with the talks I'll have at work or the hard meetings or the customer meetings I'll have at work, I oftentimes think of that versus being in like bottom side control of someone who's 300 pounds. And just going through that makes life tend to be a lot easier. Well, it definitely is a game of adversity as well. And it's about how you get through that adversity. So it's definitely taught me to fight through and keep pushing through things mentally.
That's actually interesting. I totally forgot. I mean, in a training setting, you're going to be going against a whole range of people with varying heights and weights.
Mhm.
Is Jiu-jitsu kind of like the UFC, where if you're in a tournament setting, you're going against somebody within your weight range, or how does that?
Yeah, if you're doing competition, you're gonna go against someone in your weight range, unless, sorry, after you win or if you win your bracket, then you can usually compete in an open division, meaning that all the people who won their brackets or their weight divisions can compete against each other. So
Oh,
usually you're competing against your own like weight range, but there are some tournaments where, or your own weight class, but there's some tournaments where you compete in the open division after your weight class and compete against people who are either a lot lighter than you or a lot heavier than you. Theoretically, or the way jiu-jitsu is supposed to work is you're supposed to be able to beat someone bigger than you.
that's a very interesting perspective, and that's cool that you
Yeah.
guys have a chair, have the tournaments where you guys have the winners have the ability to play against each other or grapple against each other. I definitely need to look at jujitsu a little bit more now that
Yeah.
I'm getting to hear it. With your community within your gym, I'm curious if you guys actually let me restructure that. So, for example, in college, our experience was it was very much the court, but we also were able to see our team off the court where we had social gatherings where, we got to travel to tournaments, go grab food together between games or after games, whatever it was. And I feel like that bonded us. Do you think, going from your collegiate career to post grad career or just, professional career and still being in sport, do you think you still have the same sense of community where you're meeting your, I don't know if you could call them team, but your gym off the mat, or do you guys mainly meet in tournament settings where you're focused on BJJ?
Yeah, I definitely meet my teammates off the mat, but I felt like our team just hung out around each other a lot more. I mean, that's also due to the fact that we all went to the same university, so we had a lot more opportunities to. Well, I don't live as close to everyone as I see on my team, but we do definitely have a lot of events where the entire team comes and just hangs out and just bonds. Like, for example, my professor is sponsored by a Brazilian steakhouse. He has a lot of sponsorships, but one of them is a Brazilian steakhouse. And whenever we have belt ceremonies, afterwards we'll get dinner or lunch at the Brazilian steakhouse and have a great time. And it's a lot of food. Like every time I go, I get the meat sweats after. But it's always a great time just hanging out with all the different teammates as well as their families too. So you get to really see their backgrounds, who they are, like when they're with other people, as well as just learning more about them and just hanging out. It's usually a great time. We also had some other potlucks too, where different families will host. So there is definitely a community. But I would definitely say that at least my team or our team in Illinois definitely hung out a lot more, and I felt a lot closer to them than I do to my own team. But I still definitely appreciate the bond that I've been able to get with my team at Brazilian top team right now.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, I'm a little jealous that you're speaking of meat sweats. One thing that I love Poland, I love my experience here, and I've had decent steak, but man, I am missing some good old American just ribeye.
Oh yeah,
Anything,
brother.
man. When I get back home, I already know that I'm going to like there's an Argentinian steakhouse
Mhm.
in Chicago. But I'm straying off topic. Um, with your community too, you know, back with volleyball, we had people in the same age range where, there was probably no more than a 5, 6 year difference between us. Is it the same thing at your gym where you have younger individuals competing, or does the age vary a little bit more?
Oh, it varies a ton. There's people who are still in high school in my gym, to people who are in their 60s, and everyone in between. And some people you wouldn't even be able to tell their age or know how old they are, because jujitsu has definitely kept them young, kept their joints old, that's for sure, but kept them young looking, just because it's a great workout for everyone, as well as it's definitely a good skill and something that basically anyone can do. So I've been able to train with people who are probably still doing like AP psychology right now, or people who are like big real estate tycoons in their like late 40s or 50s. So I've really been able to meet all kinds of people doing that. I usually get the best rounds out of like the really strong big guys, and those tend to be people who are either my age or like 10 to 20 years above me, just because jujitsu, if you're doing it and if you're a competitor, you're trying to make sure everything in your life is helping you be a better competitor. Like a lot of the people I roll with tend to work out a lot too, so that really gives me a good round. So I can't just use my brute strength against other people. I also need to know technique um after a while. So it's definitely different types of people and different types of background as well too. Like people who went to college, probably, or even have their PhDs, versus people who do trades. There's everyone at my gym.
That's awesome. It sounds, especially for a young professional, like networking opportunities as well
Hmm.
outside the sport. But you mentioned that the training is a little intense. I know that it's completely different than volleyball, but do you think a volleyball practice is harder, or would you consider rolling on the mat for a session as harder these days?
That's a good question, because I've definitely, you know me, I sweat a ton, and I've definitely sweat through a bunch of shirts through our practices. but I have sweat a ton and just looked like a you can do like a chalk outline on me after a few rounds of jujitsu. So that's a hard question to ask. The only thing I would say is I've definitely gotten injured a lot less playing volleyball than I have done jujitsu. That's the thing with me now is I'm trying to balance getting better at jujitsu while also not getting hurt as much. Like part of that was because earlier in my professional career, I could have trained 5 to 6 times a week. Now that I'm a lot busier and picked up some more hobbies too, I train probably at most 3 to 4 times a week. Anything more than that, and I just randomly get like an injury here and there. Part of the reason is because I'm stronger and people feel that I'm stronger, so they'll try to compensate by going faster. And then I'm trying to pick up the pace with them, and next thing you know, like I tweak something randomly. So I'd say jujitsu may be harder session wise, just because I'm more likely to get injured there versus volleyball, where it's just my aching knees. So
That's
that's probably my answer.
that's super
Mhm,
interesting because thinking about my aching knees, considering that I
mhm,
just played a game yesterday, I feel like volleyball has a lot more impact and demand on your body because you're constantly jumping versus rolling around. But you mentioned flexibility is important in jujitsu because obviously if you're not flexible or if you're not stretched out or if you're trying to use
mhm,
too weak something. Um,
mhm,
but with volleyball, you mainly have injuries that focus around the ankle, knees,
mhm,
legs.
mhm.
Where have majority of your injuries occurred when it comes to BJJ?
It's a good question. Usually legs. Well, the first major injury where I actually broke a bone, well, the only time I ever broken a bone was through a jiu-jitsu competition, and that was one of my fingers.
Bone? Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that was the first time I ever broke a bone, and it was weird. It was really unfortunate because it was my first match of my first ever competition. Within probably the first minute, I just felt for whatever reason like my left hand wasn't as strong as it used to be in my grips, but I didn't know what was going on until we got out of bounds halfway through the match, and they had to reset us inbounds. And then I looked at my hand real quick, and it just looked like it was dislocated. Like you know me, you also have I think dislocated your fingers before plenty of times blocking, so you just popped it back in. But I didn't have time to even pop it back in, and then I was kind of distracted, and then the other person got a takedown on me because I was like, wait, what the heck just happened to my finger? And we're still fighting, and I'm down 5-3, and I was able to get a sweep with a little time left. But for people who know jujitsu, the ref was on the other side of me when I was in half guard, so she didn't even know I was in half guard, so she didn't give me my points for the sweep. And had I gotten those points, I would have won the match because at that point it's the last person who scores for those rules to win the match. So I got robbed of that, and my professor and the ref were arguing for like 5 minutes in Portuguese. I didn't know what they said. Well, I'm holding
Did
my
you
finger. So what was that?
did you say professor?
Yeah, professor. Yeah, usually we call them like professors in jujitsu.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
new one.
professor. Yeah, or coach. There's like different terms, but I've usually seen professor. Like we call our professor professor. But yeah, he was yelling at the ref in Portuguese. They're going back and forth for like minutes. I don't know what they're saying. And then when they're done, I asked them, why was that not a sweep? And he goes, that sweep, and just walks away, all disappointed. And I'm just holding my finger, and I could feel like it not popping back into place. My professor tried putting it back into place, but it just wouldn't stay. And I ended up going to the ER that night because it ended up hurting a lot. I probably should have went to the ER right afterwards, but I was really hungry, so we went to this really good Mediterranean buffet. And then after a while, I thought, okay, maybe I can just wait until the next Monday so I can see my doctor. And then it really started aching. Went to the ER. That was a whole ordeal. Got a splint and then got an X-ray, and it was broken. So that was the first time I ever had like a major injury in jiu-jitsu or ever. And I wouldn't call it major because it's only a finger. Like people have heard like a lot more that I've seen, but it was just more of an inconvenience to me because I work at a desk, so I could have only typed with one hand for a good few months. And yeah, so that was more inconvenient than actual like it being tragic. But besides that, the only other injuries I've gotten have been like legs. Like I've twisted my ankle because someone landed in it by accident by trying to take my back while I was in turtle, and they just slipped. And apparently, the sound it made, it sounded like you were breaking a 2x4 over your knee, even though it didn't hurt at the time. It got really swollen like the next day. So
Oh,
it
wow.
was, yeah. So it was like definitely a delayed reaction. And the only other
Man,
thing was just knee pain, just by protecting or trying to play half guard against someone who's really strong. But besides that, that's usually the injuries I get.
man, you gotta send me some tape of you rolling. I'm curious on how all that looks because you're rolling an ankle
Yeah.
again that you just, I mean, from a complete newbie's perspective, don't expect to happen in jujitsu, you know?
Yeah,
But
that was a freak accident. Like I've never seen that happen to anyone else before. It's like they were just trying to. I got in turtle because they tried passing, and then they rushed to try to take my back, but they tripped over against their own leg, and then all their weight just landed on my ankle, and it just snapped. I've never seen that before. So that was more of a freak accident. But yeah,
geez, no, what's it called? Also with the professor, I ended up checking if you. I didn't know if I heard that right, but
yeah.
I'm thinking about that right now because one of our chants for my volleyball team out in Poland is professor. Because anytime somebody does something smart, where they like tip smart, where they like do something that isn't like the typical like hit where you're just trying
Yeah.
to for power, we always have that cheer. So stuck in my head a little bit. But we were talking about condition, well, injuries, and I want to
Mhm.
focus a little about on conditioning because outside of volleyball, I know that you were a frequent visitor of the gym where you were
Mhm.
focused on lifting, where you were focused on making sure you maintained your muscles, where you maintained your body flexibility. I'm assuming as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Has your regime changed at the gym? Because I'm assuming you still go.
Yeah, it definitely has. And for the longest time, I used to just focus on getting big because, well, we were in college and I just wanted to bench more. But I've been a lot more intentional with how I've been lifting as of recently, just because I don't care as much about being trying to be the biggest person at the gym, because one, that will never happen. What really humbled me was when I first started going to Gold's Gym. I don't go there anymore, but when I first moved to Dallas, I started going to Gold's Gym. For y'all who don't know, that's like one of the biggest, I think one of the first bodybuilder gyms ever. It's a franchise out in the United States. And the first time I went there, I just saw people who either had like the weight trainers who were like really big bodybuilders, or people who just looked like they could eat me, like gremlins and ghouls out there. So I got humbled there really quick. And learning that big muscles don't always help with jujitsu because you get tired super easily definitely made me try to cater my training more around actual performance and athleticism versus just being really strong. So I've been focusing on just different workouts that could possibly help me in jujitsu in terms of not being getting hurt when I'm getting contorted a different way, when I'm like bottom half guard, or being able to re-guard by strengthening my hips or strengthening my back, as well as strengthening my grips, as well as just correcting my posture. Because one thing jiu-jitsu players are known for, kind of similar to volleyball actually, is having terrible posture. So I've been doing a lot more things to help correct that or prevent that from happening. Because in jiu-jitsu, a lot of the time you're in like a hunch position where you're trying to get smaller in order to get out of escapes, or just generally speaking, when you're playing guard, you like being more compact. Then that could lead to just having bad posture overall. So I have been trying to make sure I'm doing workouts in order to correct for those different things in jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. And then I don't know how your typical work day looks, but I'm assuming you get to sit around a computer pretty often. So
Yeah.
posture is definitely important to work on. And then a little bit of fun facts about gold around in the US for 55 years, and it's currently spanning through 6 continents. Bodybuilders like
Really.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is the most notable, Lou Ferrigno, and it says Franco Colombo, maybe, I don't know, worked at the original Gold's Gym, which I'm pretty sure is in California, if I'm not
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah.
which is labeled as the most legendary and word for word gym in the world.
Mm.
Just for our Polish audience to understand a little bit more about how all that looks. Um, but I know that you also have other time commitments back
Mm.
in the States because for our listeners, Nosa has the opportunity to go see Drake and J. Cole live, which I'm very jealous of because great names right there. And I didn't realize they'd be a combo.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a few minutes just to get a couple more questions in, but they're focused about Poland because I know that you have, you know me,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that you haven't been to Poland. You've been to Germany, pretty close to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I want to test your knowledge a little bit about Poland and its food and your impression of it.
Mm-hmm.
You game?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna do well on this test, but I'm down to take it anyway.
All right. Well, first question: when you hear Poland, what are the first three images or words that come to your mind?
Usually it's Warsaw, sauerkraut, and Pulaski Day.
Interesting. Okay, I would think that you'd say pierogi or something in there.
Oh yeah, that didn't even
Um,
come in the top five. That's surprising to me. Yeah.
I feel like that's a bit more German, but hey, I mean, I do love my sauerkraut.
Uh-huh.
Um, think of the weather out here. What kind of weather do you think Poland has? Do you think it's a little bit more cold, temperate, or do you think it's kind of a variation like Chicago?
My understanding it's relatively cold and isn't it usually rainy there?
Uh, well, in right now it's been raining for like the last week, so
Mm,
you could say so, but I'd say majority of the winter it's just gray. You know what I mean?
okay.
But I'm giving you ideas. But what do you think the weather looks like throughout the year? Do you think it's like Chicago, a little bit warmer, a little bit colder, a little bit more rainy?
I think
I
it's
shouldn't be answering these.
yeah, well, I was thinking that it's usually colder, right?
I'd say it's similar.
Similar. Oh, really? Okay. So like really good summers, but really bad winters.
It's a little bit less humid. So when I played beach
Okay.
volleyball here, I remember in the beginning, I was playing, throughout my high school career on North Avenue, which is
Hmm.
a huge beach in Chicago where you have hundreds of nets that you could set up to play beach volleyball. And Chicago's really humid, so you'd build up a sweat. And I came out here, and I was playing, and we went three sets deep, and I was barely breaking a sweat, and people were looking at me like I had some kind of great conditioning. But truth was, I just played in the summer in Chicago, so I was used to high humidity.
Yeah, you build
Um,
for it.
so I say the summers are a little bit better out here because, again, you don't walk outside and break a sweat within 5 minutes of walking.
It makes sense. Makes
Um,
sense. I buy it.
and then last question for you, kind of focused around cuisines. So Polish cuisines are pretty diverse. Don't know how much you know about them, but can you guess one traditional Polish dish outside of pierogi and what might be in it?
I'm not gonna lie. That was the sauerkraut and pierogies were the only thing I really knew about Polish cuisine.
Man,
Besides like potatoes, right?
I mean, potatoes are definitely a signature for majority of dishes. Something like where
Yeah.
they call this habove, which is a cutlet that is
Hmm.
amazing that you're gonna have one day if you decide. I mean, when I see you,
Hmm.
I gotta introduce you to like, I mean, placki ziemniaczane, which is just potato pancakes, but like placki pozbuinicku, which come with like a little bit of goulash. Man, Polish cuisine is amazing, and the soups. Don't even get me started on them.
Yeah, I definitely have to try because I don't know if I had enough Polish food in Chicago when I was there. I remember one of my friends, she's Polish, and for her grad party, high school grad party, it was like all Polish food, and I liked it a decent bit. I liked it a decent bit, but I definitely don't think I had a good range of Polish food when I was there. I mainly ate Nigerian food because well, I'm Nigerian, so I that's what that food like that is what I really gravitated to. But I'm down to eat basically anything, so I definitely will take you up on that offer.
I mean, I'll give you my favorite Polish cuisines if you give me your favorite Nigerian cuisines, because I don't think I've had the opportunity to try any kind of Nigerian food as of yet.
Yeah.
But either way, I know that that's, kind of wrapping up today's segment. I'm hoping to have you back on to talk a little bit about your perspective of sports from, the volleyball world. But appreciate having you here, um, virtually, we could say.
Yeah. And
Appreciate all
thanks
the
for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this segment of Best Granic.